I want to take a second to address the allegations against Erik Yehezkel. He's an alleged co-conspirator of the Alexander brothers. The government has said so. There was a particularly horrendous crime that he was accused of committing, which was having a gang R word with Tal Alexander on Memorial Day weekend in 2011. He was accused of this by Lindsay Acree. Lindsay Acree actually sued Tal Alexander, her friend Hannah, and a John Doe, who was then identified as Erik Yehezkel, civilly. She also testified in court, or at least identified Erik Yehezkel's photo in an FBI photo lineup, which then led her to serve him civilly. Initially, the first indictment that came against the Alexander brothers when they were picked up and arrested in December of 2024 said that this happened in July of 2011. Erik Yehezkel had an alibi. He was not in the country, according to Border Control, U.S. Customs, and his flight records. Lindsay Acree presented an email that was sent to her mother then early June of 2011, and she said, okay, it must have been in May of 2011, Memorial Day weekend, because Erik wasn't in the country July 4th. The problem is that Erik also has an alibi for Memorial Day weekend. He was not in the country that weekend, according to U.S. Border Control records. So Erik was ID'd in a photo lineup. He was then served civilly. My understanding is that the government considers, the government has stated that he's a co-conspirator. And the place in which it was alleged that this act happened was not even in the control of either Erik Yehezkel or Tal Alexander on Memorial Day weekend of 2011. Tal Alexander's lease on that place in the Hamptons actually commenced June 15th, 2011. So imagine for a moment you're in Erik Yehezkel's shoes. What if he hadn't flown anywhere that weekend? What if he had driven to Orlando? Or what if he had driven to Georgia or gone to the Bahamas on a boat? How would he have possibly proven himself innocent? It's crazy when you think about it. Again, if he did this crime, he deserves full accountability, as does anybody. But it's also important to realize that so many of these claims that ran wild on Instagram, in The Real Deal, New York Times, and other publications, on cross-examination or really investigated properly, fell apart. Lindsay Acree's claim that this happened in July of 2011, or at least that's how it was indicted, was then moved to Memorial Day weekend. Tal does not have the house, and Erik Yehezkel is not in the country. So think about all of the times that the media ran with that story. Other people stood up and tried to say that they had similar experiences, but there's no evidence that this experience ever happened. So Erik Yehezkel is ID'd. His face is shown in federal court as the person who Lindsay Acree believes R-worded her. And he has ironclad evidence that he was not in the country on the weekend that she asserted that that happened. I've tweeted about Erik Yehezkel's involvement. Obviously, he had insane text messages and was very crude and inappropriate. But I do need to clarify for the record here that what was presented and what he was accused of, it simply doesn't make sense in the context of using your brain. So this isn't to say Erik Yehezkel is a perfect person. I don't know him, but I will say that for what he's accused of doing in this sex trafficking conspiracy alongside the Alexander brothers, particularly count 2 with Lindsay Akery. He has an ironclad alibi, and it is quite astonishing to think that someone can be served, have to speak to the FBI, have their face put up in a courtroom when you have a rock solid alibi. Are there consequences for that? Who knows? But in the case of Erik Yehezkel allegedly doing something horrendous Memorial Day weekend of 2011 with Tal Alexander to Lindsay Akery, it's pretty obvious he wasn't in the country. And as they say, they got the wrong guy.